Hello. Hi, Alison. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, Serica. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. So, welcome everyone. As you know, my name is Circa Coyle. I'm the founder of Empowering Expat Teachers, and it is my mission to empower you to lead a personally, professionally, and financially rewarding life. And I'm delighted to say today we have Alison Schofield, and she is expat teacher. She's an author, and she's the co-founder of the Centre for Educators of BMLs. So, Alison, great to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Excellent.
So I guess we should tell our listeners what BMLs are, right?
Absolutely.
That's probably a question.
To ask you. Absolutely.
Great. So basically, I am a specialist who works with bilingual and multilingual learners. So we say BMLs for short, but really our listeners would be familiar with the terms ELL for English language learners or EAL, English as an additional language, depending which international system they're using. So in our work at the Center for Educators of BMLs, we create courses and trainings and things like that. But we also have research about BMLs in international schools and also in national schools. But for our particular interest, we're very concerned with BMLs in international schools. So so really that's the terminology that we use, because we try to see these learners as having an asset rather than just having a deficit in English. So we believe it's more of an asset-based terminology. So just so our people can understand where we're coming from.
Yeah, that's so important with students, isn't it? To put a positive spin or, you know.
Exactly, because a lot of them are coming with knowledge in those languages, right? So if we just look at the fact that they have just a little bit of English, we forget that they have maybe 10 years of Finnish language and learning in that language. So
of course,
it just puts the forefront of yeah, exactly.
And tell me, Alison, tell me a bit about your experience working, because I met you in Dubai last year. So can you tell me a bit about your experience as a teacher, expat teacher, working with BML students?
Right. So I'm from Canada originally, but I was abroad in Dubai and Abu Dhabi for a total of 13 years. So I did a lot of work with, like you, with a lot of the Emirati students. Mm-hmm. So I worked in an international school in Abu Dhabi that was all locals. Mm-hmm. And then I did the same in Dubai. And then eventually I started my own company, and I did a lot of work with bilingual children who were referred for special education services, and a lot of them were misdiagnosed bilinguals. So that's sort of how I came into this, this career now that I'm in. But basically, when I was in an international setting, it was, a large proportion of our students, maybe 90 or 95% of our student body was either a bilingual or multilingual learner, so speaking 2, 3, or even 4 languages. And that was very interesting. Although in Canada, when I was teaching, we did have a lot of BMLs there as well. But certainly it's a different context in a Canadian setting where they're having to get used to the culture that we're, it's dominant for us. Whereas when we go as international teachers, we, international teachers or Western teachers find a lot of interesting things when they first go to school and see the student body where they're not from their own culture, right? Well, not that they're not only from their culture, but they're not coming or fitting into that kind of dominant culture. So they may come with their own ideas of education, their own understanding about what it means to learn. And that may be different to our understanding. So our worldview is a little bit different. So I know a lot of teachers struggle. And certainly for me, when I started working, I worked with kindergarten students. So they were 5 years old and they didn't speak, any English at that point. So I had to actually learn a lot of Arabic. I don't know about you, but, for me, I learned a lot from students. Yeah. So
that's really interesting, actually. You're saying all the important factors that you have to consider. So for you, with kindergarten, it was important to learn some phrases in the local language. What would you say are other factors that might be important to consider when you are working? Because I do know like a lot of people, a lot of members in the group, you know, they're starting to work in either predominantly Arabic speaking schools or with a ministry in the Gulf region, in the government schools. And they actually are coming from a lot of contexts where they have actually had no prior experience whatsoever, either with students with English second language or BMLs, or with students who from Arabic culture. Are there any like tips or maybe you could offer our members, you know, about what's important to consider when you are coming into that context?
Well, definitely. I think the first thing to think about is try and learn a little bit about your students' culture before you even arrive. So either you know, do a little bit of research on your own, or you may talk to people who've also worked with that kind of student body. That way you have an understanding about, you know, what are the kinds of things that are important to the people from that culture. What is the style of, you know, learning that they're used to? For example, are they used to a rote kind of teaching style, or are they used to more open-ended? Is the teacher the one who holds the knowledge and the students have to just listen passively? And that is a very common thing that you might discover, right? I had a very interesting conversation with a teacher who had come on our course, and she was a Canadian teacher also, and she went to work in Korea, and she was teaching kindergarten. She said, you know, in our culture, when we work kindergarten students, we're enthusiastic and we talk a lot. We also sing songs. We ask students to look at us, look at me so I know that you're listening, that kind of thing. And so she started to, at the beginning, to, you know, notice that her students were very quiet and they were a little bit passive. She called them a little bit passive learners. But what happened is, over time, of course, as they got used to her and she started to work with them a little bit, they started to respond. They would look at her in the eye. They would be more gregarious in their learning. But what happened one day was she had an assembly, and the students' parents came along. And in Korean culture, it's very important, when you're being respectful to an adult, not to look at them directly, to be a bit more quiet, to have the adult take the dominant lead. So the parents were actually really surprised and shocked that the students seemed to appear disrespectful to her as a teacher. Yeah. Because they were shouting out, which is very fine in our culture, right? For students to shout out answers, to, you know, become more enthusiastic. And to them, they probably hadn't considered the fact that it's not only English that the students are going to be learning, it's also the culture of the teachers, or the dominant culture maybe in a Western style school. So if it's a British school, you'd be, you know, enculturating essentially into the British culture, right? So that was something that I thought was a really interesting experience, and really makes you think about how your background, you see it from your eyes, but now when you come abroad and you work with students, you have to kind of understand where they're coming from, what the parents' expectations are, and how to communicate that well, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. Like just what you're saying.
So that's
absolutely. Oh, so yeah, what you're saying, it's exactly true. I mean, it's not just like I taught Qatari and Emirati, and it really is. It's not just the English. There's so much more behind it. There's gestures. There's, even for example, you've mentioned about the fact that it's good to know some like maybe phrases if they're younger in Arabic. You've also mentioned about considering their style of teaching, considering your style of teaching, how they learn, the expectations, the different what's the word, like gestures, and you know how you say the ideas is vital to think about when you are teaching. You're placed in a local school, teaching local students.
Well, I think also what's important is to understand that behavior problems or responses from your students aren't always a behavior problem, right? A lot of BMLs struggle with the language barrier. So they really need to be able to access the curriculum or the activities. So if they can't, they're always going to be working at frustration levels. So you start to see a lot of things that you would say, oh, this is a behavior, my students are acting out. But really, you have to try and think about where they're coming from and get to, to the bottom of that, to really understand what the concerns are, the underlying concerns. It might be a language barrier. It might be that the student in their culture is uncomfortable working with another student of the opposite sex, for example. So maybe they don't do that, in their culture, but the Western teacher doesn't know that. So really try and not put on the, behavior interpretation from your culture too soon. Just be really open, try to understand what could be going on for that student. Ask them if they have the language, or ask maybe a staff member who comes from that culture. Oftentimes schools do some cultural training, right? They do give you some cultural awareness, and that's really helpful. But if not, then you can just find out a little bit more yourself. Also, there's a lot of really good research points that come into play here. So if you're working with large populations of bilingual and multilingual learners in your school, it's really helpful for you to know how long does it take a student to actually learn English. Not only so they're learning to have a conversation, but they're learning so that they can actually use the language academically for essay writing, for reading and comprehending and that kind of thing. And a lot of people would be shocked to know that it can take up to 7 or 10 years, 7 to 10 years for a student to go to get, some mastery or fluency with academic language. So if your student is coming to you and they have a strong mother tongue language and maybe even literacy in that language, that makes it a lot easier for them to learn a new language like English. So that's also helpful to find out. So it's helpful to find out, and if they don't have a strong mother tongue language, it will take them probably the higher number, maybe up to 10 years to really solidify. So, a lot of times we think the younger students do well because they have a lot of time, but, also younger students are moving from one language into a new language. So they actually have gaps, and it takes them a long time to catch up. So a lot of parents will actually start to have their children speaking in English at home because they think it makes sense. If they go to an English school, they should start speaking English at home. And that's actually not a good advice. So we want parents understand, keep your home language and really reinforce that, because the more vocabulary, so the more vocabulary your student has in their mother tongue, they're actually going to, pair that word with the English word. So for example, in Arabic, we know that car is sayara. So if I know the English word car, I just pair those two vocabulary words together. I don't have to learn the meaning of sayara again, right?
Absolutely.
So that makes it easier.
That's
so that's a very interesting thing.
Even like you were saying with the academic, English, I know when I was working in previous schools, like some people would say, oh, why does he have English second language or BML support? Because he's so, he speaks, he can have a conversation, he would, crack jokes. And the student had a really brilliant English, but it was very informal English, it was colloquial, it was spoken. But actually when it came to exams and understanding academic English and exam questions, that's where he needed. So it was a little bit deceptive sometimes. If they had excellent spoken English, it wouldn't necessarily transfer to the written or to the academic. It was informal, so that's, I've definitely been fooled by some students sometimes, and you think actually, but then, when it comes to academic.
Exactly. And that's a really important point that you've made there, that teachers can be deceived easily because it only takes 6 months to 2 years to sound fluent with conversation, but that's totally different than getting enough vocabulary words to use it academically. So for our teachers, don't be fooled by that. Just really find out about the language background of your students and how much exposure do they have to their mother tongue. That would be really helpful. Another point is that vocabulary is actually the missing link for our students. A lot of times when you go into work with your BMLs and you have these workbooks and things, and sometimes a pre-formatted curriculum, and you have to get through it, You don't actually have students who become proficient and comfortable speaking the language. They may be good at writing, but they're actually not getting enough exposure and practice using vocabulary. So while books might teach vocabulary, we actually have to give students more opportunity to learn and use it. And actually it takes up to 12 different exposures or, opportunities to hear a word before students can start using that word on their own. So if you can imagine how profound that is for our speakers of other languages, then it's really important that we learn strategies for teaching vocabulary.
That's so true, because even I'm thinking sometimes in the secondary school context, or probably even primary school, we probably don't mention a really important keyword 12 times. You sort of mention it once, twice, 3 times, and then you hope that they've gone home and learned it, or again, the idea of, teaching a word, but they don't actually use it themselves to reinforce it or to understand it, or they don't know how to use it in the context or in writing or in speaking. It's so true. I think sometimes we do overestimate, perhaps, rather than taking it down to a level or two, not a level or two, but you know what I mean? Sort of kind of reinforcing the kind of basics first before you.
Exactly. Yeah. And, it's something, and I've spoken to so many teachers, we don't actually get taught how to teach vocabulary very well in, teachers college or teachers training. So that's something that was a really big eye opener when we did our research, and what we found was just unbelievable. And our most of the work that we do really emphasizes vocabulary and training teachers to how they can use vocabulary really impactfully, so that the students are not only hearing it over and over through multiple ways, but they're actually talking to each other daily, using different words, maybe use words from the lesson that you've given them, but also using words like analyze and interpret. So words that we call academic language that they need to understand, their more formal studies.
Absolutely.
So this is really important.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And so from this, obviously you came to Dubai and you're working teaching students BMLs and BML students, and you obviously, you see that, there is a gap between like what we're taught as teachers when we train. I mean, my PGCE is in modern foreign languages, so I have been taught how to teach a language, but there's not many teachers have that experience, so what came from that for you after that, when you came here and you saw that maybe there was a lot of teachers here without the support or help to teach students with extra languages?
Well, that's interesting. So for me, I told you I'd already been working with different student groups in international schools. And I really started to notice, once I did my own company, and I worked a lot doing literacy intervention with students. And I started to ask my own questions. So I started to think, I started to see my students improving. They would come to me and I would work really targeted with reading and writing and daily practice. And I started to see huge changes. And I thought, what is the factor that's really contributing to that? And not only that, how can we do that more in schools? Because I know that I was actually very lucky in my teacher training, because I did have, some elements of language acquisition, but it wasn't enough. So I knew that this was something that needed to be more widespread. So that's when myself and my colleague Francesca, we started to do research. We found a lot of information at the the post-secondary or university level, but it didn't trickle down into the practical world of teaching in a K-12 or K-13 setting, right? So that's really what prompted us to research, and then we wrote our book, and now actually run courses for teachers, and not only for teachers who are ELL or E8L teachers. They're really to empower all teachers who work in schools with BMLs, which now we can say is probably almost all schools, right? Whether you're in an international school or even national, because BMLs are the fastest growing student population in the world in English speaking schools. So most teachers are going to have experiences working with them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So now now what we do is we run courses for teachers to train them to understand language acquisition. So how does a student learn a language? How long does it take? What are the processes? And also, not only that, what are the cultural pieces that come into play when you're working with students in a K-12 setting? Because there's a lot of information, you know, in TESOL settings and that kind of thing that's not really relevant for classroom teaching, when we have to do a lot of different activities that wouldn't be useful, you know, for the outside training centers and things like that. So we focus only on that setting. So and basically what we do is we have an 8-week course where we work with teachers. It's all online, actually, and we work with teachers from all over the world. So they take an 8-week course, and our course is called Bilingual and Multilingual Learners from the Inside Out. It's actually the same name as our book. And teachers come online and they learn through 7 modules, and they're weekly modules. And what they do is they learn not only the kind of theory, and we don't like boring theory, we like really interesting facts and research, and that's what we tried to focus on in our book. Yeah. So we give them that research piece so that they know the expertise that's involved, but we also get them to try out different strategies with the students that they're working with in their schools already. So we give them over 50 new strategies. So 50 new strategies that they can start using the very next day. So they come online and they do a little bit of self-study with readings, and then they do some work within their classrooms. They also, throughout the course, they follow a case study. So they pick one student and then they try out some of the activities, like the assessments and things, with that particular student in 10 or 15-minute blocks. So that way the learning comes alive.
That's brilliant, because as you say, there's so much research out there, but actually doesn't necessarily come down to the practical level, that you can actually take it and use it the next day in your class, or, you know, focus on for the 8 weeks. Or I love the idea of the case study. It's really interesting. That's fantastic. I think it's so important, and you can see, at least you can see then in real life, you know, and you can apply it straight away to your own teaching situation.
Exactly. And at the end, what's really nice is we have, in the final week, our teachers do an interest project. So they try and think about it, an area that interests them. It could be, for example, a policy, so creating a language policy. It could be creating a classroom resource, or even working with a group of colleagues and doing some kind of initiative at their school. Some of the teachers before have done training for parents about language acquisition, or they've done working with mother tongue library and things like that. So it's really open, and that's what makes it more of a practical course. So the teachers who come on our course actually get a lot of research. They get the skills and strategies, but they also, you know, hopefully get to explore their own interests too. So, so that's just a little bit about our course, and definitely we are open to working with teachers, already qualified teachers, who will be working with bilinguals.
Excellent. Well, actually,
sounds like a.
Sorry for the siren outside. Sorry, I can tell I live in the middle of a city. It's like ridiculously noisy. But I remember we met last year for a coffee, and actually we discussed, because I'd done my master's 2 years ago. I completed a master's in applied linguistics, English language teaching, and pretty much everything I did in my master's, I think you have in this course. That's which is absolutely fantastic. You know, for teachers don't want to take a year out, obviously, and do a master's, but also a lot of my master's was theory. Whether here, I feel like you've covered everything in your course, with the practical side and then support from people who are actual teachers, not just people who do research. Do you know what I mean, in second language acquisition, but never actually have taught themselves, you know?
Right. Yeah, you're right. That's sort of how we approached it. And we've also, we also approach it from the point that the teacher knows how to teach already, right? So they know curriculum, they know their teaching philosophies and approaches, and we teach them how to embed these strategies. You don't have to do something totally new and different. A lot of teachers, you know, when they begin working with BMLs, think, oh, the student is much lower in their level, so I have to actually make news for them. And it's not always about that. Sometimes it's just about cutting away extra information or condensing or doing something that meets the same objective in a different way. But you don't have to. We try and get away from teachers, you know, having to do a lot of extra work. So we try and work smarter, and that's what we teach.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. That sounds fantastic. That's excellent. That's exactly what it is. Work smarter for the teacher and for the student, like lighten the load on both, I think, you know, but as you say, get them most effectively, but still getting, seeing valid progression and getting the results, but maybe approaching it from a different way.
Right.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And tell us, Alison, you've kindly have a nice treat for the Empowering Expat Teacher members. Can you tell us a bit more about the course and also what the treat you have for our members too, please?
Great. Yes. So we're really happy because we're going to be running a session for a next 8-week course, and it's beginning April the 17th. So that's after the break. So beginning April the 17th, and it goes until the 5th of June. And so that brings us to 8 weeks. So if any of your teachers are interested, from Empowering Expat Teachers, if they're interested in joining our course, I know you're going to put the links up, and they can learn more about it, and I'll share some of that with you. So they can learn more about it. But we also have a 10% discount for any members that would like to come on. So the course is normally $749, but with a special discount, it's $674 for an individual teacher. Okay, so if they're interested, what they should do is they should probably just contact you, Sarah, and let you know that they'd like to join the course, and then we can send them all the details from our side.
Absolutely perfect. That's excellent. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. And even as well, like, I know, even in terms of like it's like a huge part of PD, professional development, to have a course like that. I mean, to put that in your CV and.
Exactly. So I think for a lot of teachers that are coming abroad, if they don't have so much experience, this will really help them to be confident and come across in that way to their, potential employers and that sort of thing, because it just gives them a whole new edge in their professional learning.
Absolutely. And as you say, even if they decide to return back to their home country, BMLs are, the fastest growing number in English speaking schools around the world. So it's absolutely fantastic, the skills and
it's always really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Alison. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for all the tips and also the aspects that, particularly teachers who are coming from maybe Ireland or the UK or America, and they have never worked with students that are BMLs or English second language, or nor have they worked with, majority students from a particular culture, if they're going, Korean, if they're going to North or South Korea, or if they're going, Arabic students, if they're coming to the Gulf. Thank you so much for that, like giving us all those list of things to consider in language, in terms of gestures, in terms of our expectations as teachers and everything else. So thank you so much. That was so helpful.
Thank you for having me. It was interesting talking to you today.
Yeah, no, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for that. And as you said, all the links I'll put in either if it's on the webpage or in the comment section below when I upload it on our group. Okay, so everyone will be able to contact you and check everything out. And also your book. I also read your book. Your book is fantastic too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll put all the links. So anybody who's interested can find everything they need. So we're looking forward to meeting some new students.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you so much, Alison. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks.
All
Bye.
Right. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.